with the realization that Bernie Sanders is a Democratic frontrunner and following the calls for his ouster. Now that's MSNBC Chris Matthews' ouster. He opened his show Monday night with an apology to Bernie Sanders. Now, that's after, during the Nevada caucus, Matthews made an awful comparison to Sanders being the front runner, comparing his wins to the time when the Nazis literally took France. Now, I'm going to show you that video, and then we're going to show you the apology.
I was reading last night, Brian, I know you're a history guy too. I'm reading last night about the fall of France in the summer of 1940. And the general, Renault, calls up Churchill and says, it's over.
All right, so that's what he said about Bernie. About Bernie winning Nevada. That's insane. Why would you want to make that a comparison, history buff or not? I mean, it's crazy. Now, I've got an explanation for it. But first, I want to show you the video where he apologizes due to, of course, the massive backlash there was from progressives. Take a look.
As I watched the one-sided results of Saturday's Democratic caucus in Nevada, I reached for an historical analogy and used a bad one. I was wrong to refer to an event from the last days, or actually the first days of World War II. Senator Sanders, I'm sorry for comparing anything from that tragic era in which so many suffered, especially the Jewish people, to an electoral result in which you were the well-deserved winner. This is going to be a hard-fought, heated campaign of ideas. In the days and weeks and months ahead, I will strive to do a better job myself of elevating the political discussion. Congratulations, by the way, to you, Senator Sanders, and to your supporters on a tremendous win down in Nevada.
All right, so that he looked a little pained, right? Like, I really don't want to apologize, but I guess I'm going to apologize. And to be fair, actually really was a decent apology. Okay, so now here's the thing. I actually don't think that he meant to make an analogy of Bernie Sanders to a Nazi, right? So this is actually kind of different from the Chuck Todd situation, because Chuck Todd really did want to make that comparison. He brought up the quote himself from a conservative writer, right, who called Bernie Sanders' army a digital brown shirts. And so he brought it up of his own volition and was like, hey, this guy, digital brown shirts. I mean, come on. But no. Chuck Todd, definitely worse. With Matthews, I think it's a little deeper than that, right? It's the fact that he reached to a World War II analogy and one of the most devastating battles of the war and the collapse of the Maginot Line as sort of an allegory or a bit of a metaphor. And I think that's reflective of his personal anxiety about his own power and influence, or the fact that he actually starts to lose this power and influence. I mean, again, for months on his show, he's basically been saying, Bernie Sanders, dangerous. Don't vote for Bernie Sanders. He's going to lose to Donald Trump. He's going to hurt the country. Sanders is bad. He's a socialist. There's Cuba. There's Venezuela. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Whatever you do not vote for Bernie Sanders. Okay. Now, all of those, of course, are not only right-wing talking points and useless Red Scare baiting, but also completely wrong. Bernie Sanders polls the best against Donald Trump. He is massively electable. But here's the thing that matters, right? The most is that people are no longer listening to Chris Matthews. There was a time where people like James Carville and Chris Matthews and all those, old school pundits had actually, were right in the way that they understood the political landscape. But what we saw and what we've been seeing since 2016 is that they no longer understand it. And in fact, they haven't understood it since 2008, right? For a very, very long time. In fact, Nicole Wallace, when she was doing the coverage of the Nevada caucuses, I just don't understand voters anymore. I don't understand them. And this is a similar refrain that you hear from a lot of these television pundits. Like, I don't get it. My old political playbooks don't work anymore. Nothing is going as expected. We expected somebody like, going back to 2016, for example, or 2015, even further into the Republican primaries, nobody expected Donald Trump to win, except for a lot of us in independent media who were saying, no, Donald Trump, he is going to win. It's very likely he's going to win the nomination. And it's very likely that if you put up an establishment candidate like Hillary Clinton, for example, you're going to lose. So now what happened? Donald Trump won the Republican nomination. And just like we on this show had been warning people, Donald Trump, if you put up Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump is going to win. He's going to win. And that's exactly what happened. And the media has not learned from that. They do not believe in upstart outsider candidates. They think, oh no, the establishment is great. Everybody loves the establishment. Everybody's doing fantastic. And so these outsider candidates, they have absolutely no chance. But this isn't 1984 anymore. You're not, hanging around with Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. No, the rule book has completely changed. Matthews himself seems to still be stuck back in 1984. So no longer are people listening to any of his analysis, since he's wrong. And not only that, but he's also facing a possible, with Bernie Sanders, an increase in his taxes. Now, that's one thing that he does not like. He's also witnessing the very thing that he cherishes, the horse race, the media, the government, being described as corrupted by big money, which is true. That kind of realization is something that is terrible for someone like Chris Matthews, whose identity is really kind of wrapped up in this. Okay? And that's the thing, too. A lot of these personalities, their entire purpose is wrapped up in the politics and the horse race of it all, right? And that's why they can't get off their thinking. That's why they're in this bubble. And so when you pop that, I mean, who is Chris Matthews without his political analysis and his influence and his money? Nothing. And that's what he's afraid of the most, I think. And so the change is happening and will continue to happen because of Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders, to someone like Chris, is probably the worst thing that could happen. Losing your influence and your place in the discourse to the changing politics of the era, and also paying a little bit more in taxes, is probably the worst thing in the world to them. And as Emma Vigeland points out, he instinctively reached for something terrible to describe it as, because to him, it is the worst thing in the world. It is the Maginot Line breaking. It's the Nazis flooding into France. Oh my God, what is happening? And so that's why you have the freak out here. And so this is what power looks like when it's afraid of losing its own power. When the realization has started to sink in that Bernie Sanders is very likely going to be the Democratic nominee and subsequently the next president of the United States. Yikes. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to take a quick break. We'll come back. I'll thank some patrons, some channel members, read some comments, of course, from you guys. And then we're going to go into Bernie Sanders explains how we're going to pay for it. That's a question a lot of people love to know. And then we've got electability. And so we'll talk about that coming up after this break. Stay right here. Please like and share the stream, and we'll be back in a couple minutes around the nation. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.